war has been raging for the soul of James Bond, and Amazon just won.
It's so sad!
Amazon versus Barbara Broccoli, and as long as they were disagreeing, nothing got done, which was the best thing for the fans. While Barbara described Amazon as effing idiots, what they wanted to do was spin-offs multiple TV shows. In line with their show Road to a Million,
I put real people into a James Bond adventure and placed 10 questions around the world,
where apparently the Britishness associated with James Bond was captured in the contestants because they cast diversity. The fact that that didn't make sense in the English language troubled nobody. But then again, Amazon also wanted to do spin-offs of various different characters, like Miss Moneypenny, a show about filing, answering telephone calls, and trying to shag James Bond.
They did not send us because they thought we could do it. We are here because they are sure we cannot.
You never take me to dinner looking like this, James. You never take me to dinner.
What would I do without you, Miss Moneypenny? Thank you.
While some people would have hated it, I probably would have found it pissing hilarious. And I might actually get my wish. Now Barbara has ceded control to Amazon.
Broccoli, Zoccoli, what's he doing today?
He's dead.
Let's not get it wrong though, this wasn't David versus Goliath. This was more like Lilith fighting Satan. Barbara versus Amazon is very much like J.K. Rowling versus every lunatic in the universe. She agrees with them with 99.9% of evil ideas, just not one of them. And that one was that she didn't want spin-offs of TV shows because she thinks movies are more important. This reportedly cost Amazon an extra $1 billion to take control of the franchise from Barbara. They say you can't put a price on friendship, family, on your father's legacy. Turns out you can't. For the low cost of $1 billion, she'll do anything. Probably would have spit roasted his corpse. Do you want him stuffed and put on your mantelpiece, Bezos? We'll do that for another $1 million. Even more bizarrely is that Amazon overpaid for MGM, as it was only valued at $3.5 to $4 billion, and they paid $8.5 billion. And now they paid an extra $1 billion just to get Bond. Hence it took another $1 billion to ensure they could exploit the Ian Fleming IP. The mask slipped for a second there, didn't it?
I think you're a sexist, misogynist dinosaur, a relic of the Cold War.
My pelvic floor is all over the place.
One source said she's a fighter. She got tired of fighting. Not like much of a fighter to me. This had to be an emotional decision for Broccoli, which really is Broccoli's strong point, and seems to be the explanation for Daniel Craig's Bond as a whole. One British executive said without Barbara's careful supervision, Bond just becomes Jack Reacher in some TV show. Well, it's better than having Barbie and James Bond after all, which is what we've had for Daniel Craig for the last years.
Did you really die that day? Is there any of the old 007 left?
There's already execs on hand at Amazon to handle Bond, such as Courtney Valenti, who handled Barbie. I didn't even know that was coming up next. Seems like we can continue Daniel Craig after all. They would have just kept on fighting, says one source, about the rift between Broccoli and Amazon. Now a new Bond movie can be delivered to a new generation. There's your problem. You always think you have to update a property to modernize it for the modern audience, a new generation, not realizing that that new generation came from the old generation, so if you just make it for the original fans, they will get their kids interested in it, as people have done in movies for decades, you insufferable bins. But updating Bond for a modern audience isn't actually a problem that Barbara had. Broccoli saw one of her main goals when she took over 007, to shake off the chauvinism that had characterized Bond's appearances in the novels and the early films. In other words, she wanted to entirely destroy Bond. She couldn't understand why Bond was created or why Bond was liked, because she wasn't the target audience. To her, it was chauvinistic. To everybody else, it was being a man. But she can't understand that because lack of abstraction, probably a problem here as well. Main player character will see herself as the default, and so anything that varies from that default must be inherently wrong and need to be changed. That's why, with Craig in the lead, she wanted Bond to mature. He's not just engaging in one-night stands anymore. He had to embark on a mature relationship, and she made sure the franchise had come a long way when it came to female characters, as the previous ones were named for men. Broccoli made sure that this was the first Bond that had been released for the Time's Up era. Broccoli said that filmmakers were careful to reflect the current mood and moment in the portrayal of women.
Do you get it? Do you get it?
Something that was entirely irrelevant to the Bond franchise previously. Strangely, the people you should care about in the Bond franchise are Bond. Everybody else in the movie is simply a side character in order to make Bond do Bond things. You're objectifying them. That's the point. They must be objectified because Bond objectifies them. This is a person who goes through life realizing he could die at any second, and so he takes every advantage to live the high life when he can. Just because Bond was willing to sacrifice his tomorrow for yours doesn't mean he's not going to live his today.
What do you call people you go out with but you don't try to sleep with?
Men.
Of course, that's a concept beyond Broccoli and likely Amazon. That's why Broccoli had to make the Bond movies completely unbelievable. Ana de Armas and Lashana Lynch are fully capable of holding their own in the action department. Bond has been evolving along with all the other men in the world because they're turning into women. Don't you understand? They're evolving into the superior form of me. It's a bizarre attitude for someone like Broccoli to have, and yet not surprising in the least.
Check your two balls very carefully.
Some have just gotten there more quickly than others. Some men have been evolving into me faster than others. Those other men's inferior, wrong people. If only they embraced their weakness and emotion, they'd be better people. Is it any surprise that Daniel Craig got destroyed under this leadership? In fact, it seems like the only reason that Bond wasn't destroyed even more was down to Wilson, who was described as cerebral. He was keenly interested in exploring the inner workings of MI6, whereas Barbara was concerned about the emotional side of Bond, as well as how relevant it was to the now. It was Michael that had the good story brain and a macabre dimension that allowed them to keep an Ian Fleming flavour of the thing. Notice how this only referred to Michael, meaning that they know that Barbara is nothing like Ian Fleming in the least, that the emotional side of Bond had nothing to do with Bond. So as you may be able to tell, I am no fan of Broccoli. Or her work. And yet, the fight with Amazon was the best thing for the James Bond franchise. She did have some good ideas when compared to Amazon about James Bond. Some. She was against Amazon's view of the franchise, who saw it more as an algorithm-driven content farm.
I put real people into a James Bond adventure and placed 10 questions around the world.
That had Broccoli's backing. If those are the kind of TV shows she signed off on, imagine the one she's refused. She even was so proud of it, she wanted a full marketing push with billboards and TV commercials. And while they're going, well, Amazon, the algorithm didn't think it needed it. As somebody that saw the series, I'm on Amazon's side. Amazon executives griped that the show's first season lost a significant share of viewers after 6 minutes. And they are right, Brian Cox was the best thing about it. But he only agreed to do the show because he mistakenly thought he was signing on to star in a James Bond movie. Work has begun on a second season. You're insane. You're all insane. The show has become a venue for discussion with its Amazon about the character's place in the broader world, whether the valorization of a dangerously violent, womanizing secret agent is what's best for society today. During a company meeting about the second season, an Amazon employee admitted their own misgivings. I have to be honest, I don't think James Bond is a hero. The room went silent. The room should have fired them on the spot. No, bye, get out. Get out, you scum. This is why, despite Barbara and Amazon being so ideologically aligned, they still had such a rift between them. There was still such trouble. She said to believe that the business's primary goal was to sell loo paper, electronics, and consumer goods. This is actually an attitude that Amazon has suffered with at large with the entertainment industry. It's one of the reasons they have to overpay for franchises or to buy places like MGM. Nobody wants to sell themselves to them because they don't have any confidence in their entertainment chops.
You don't like my methods. You think I'm an accountant, a bean counter, more interested in my numbers than your instincts.
One of the reasons that Rings of Power was so important for them. They wanted Rings of Power to win awards so that their studio could get prestige and finally get taken seriously among the entertainment industry. That worked out well for them, didn't it?
Go back to your hill and be buried!
It's Gilgit Daddy.
He does slay in a certain way.
He does slay.
Nor to her credit did Barbara think that James Bond should be turned into a woman, saying outright that I think the next James Bond will be a man because I don't think a woman should play James Bond. Although that was largely because she thought that they were too good to actually play men's roles and should have roles of their own in their own movies. You see, Broccoli wanted strong female characters. I'm not particularly interested in taking a male character and having a woman play it. I think women are far more interesting than that. Far more interesting than those male roles over there. Could this be one of the reasons why she was so interested in turning Craig into one of them? It backs up what was said before, that by turning Craig into an effeminate little girl, they were making him deeper and more complex. Because men just aren't, you see. It really is, you don't know what you don't know. With Barbara, that's a lot. Barbara may have not wanted a woman to play James Bond, but she was happy for Daniel Craig to be one.
The world has changed, but the numbers remain stacked against us. It's about money and power.
With a woman at the helm, the franchise that often glorified the motif of male dominance, why it was successful, suddenly became more equal. As now we drag Bond down to our level, Bond finally had a female boss, and the beauties began to evolve from one-dimension stereotypes. Stereotypes exist because they reflect something of reality that is so common, they become a common meme among people, as shorthand for this is what you should expect of that group. Stereotypes wouldn't actually get under people's skin if they weren't recognizably true. This is why you won't find a Frenchman getting annoyed about garlic around his neck or a beret. I think the success of Bond is that he's not afraid to change with the times, and don't you understand? Bond is less important in modern times. Now it's about everybody else. Sometimes it got a little stuck in that time, when it was good. I mean, the books were written in the 50s and the film started in the 60s.
My dear, you should learn to be admired in silence.
And the world has changed dramatically for the worse since then. And so, we're dragging him down to that level as well. Oh, Captain Subtext going strong here. No, instead Barbara thought that Bond's been evolving along with all the other men in the world. Some have just gotten there more quickly than others. I do like the idea that men have been evolving. They've been becoming more like women, and that's evolving, improving, advancing into the next stage. Barbara is the kind of person that think men and male characters are simply broker, inferior versions of women, and that eventually they will grow up, mature, evolve into women, their superior form. This is somebody who clearly should never have been in charge of James Bond, a masculine male franchise. Just absolutely no idea how to be in control of that IP. She was a disaster for it, and it showed from her tenure. Sure, she took over when Pierce Brosnan started. GoldenEye, definite high point there. But that was her first movie. She hadn't really had time yet to put her stamp on things. And everything went downhill from there.
Check your two balls very carefully.
Of course, Barbara was responsible for a female M. And this.
You don't like my methods. You think I'm an accountant, a bean counter, more interested in my numbers than your instincts.
We're afraid to walk the streets at night, yet some of us are even more afraid to return to our own homes.
The signs were there right from the start, but it was only over time that the rot, the deconstruction, and turning Bond into an inferior version of himself happened. So I am not sad that Barbara's gone. Barbara was even on board with changing Bond. Okay, she did want him to be a man. That was her only category for him, though. Sorry, are you a man and can cry like a little girl? Are you a whiny little bit? Those were only two categories for him. He didn't need to be suave and sophisticated. In fact, she really liked that Daniel Craig was rough. Who knows, it seems to be her type. Campbell said it took me a while to see it. Daniel's acting was terrific, but he wasn't a pretty boy. It was Barbara who was adamantly in favour of him. She does like the rough look on her blokes. Although if Barbara's acting out her real life in the Bond movies, it would have been interesting to see the movie where a woman 12 years his senior won him at an auction, paid £18,000 for him, and then love-bombed him by introducing him to various A-list pals, show business events, showering him with opulent gifts, far beyond anything he could have imagined. He was shocked after she gifted him a Picasso after he just casually admired it at an exhibition. If you said you liked a painting, 6 months or a year later, she'd have bought it for you. Ultimately, it was this buying his affection, essentially, that doomed the romance. When she offered to buy him a £180,000 Aston Martin, it left him feeling uncomfortable. Deep down, I knew there was always going to be an imbalance. It's strange how somebody who's been subjected to the realities of the gender roles in a romance never once thought to put them in your pissing movies. It's almost like human behavior is instinctual and fixed, like we evolved for a certain purpose, and that any good story reflects that, rather than your mythical ideas of how you'd like things to be. That kind of is, though, where the differences end between her and Amazon. Seems like she'd be in line with Amazon and everything else.
Could ride you to victory.
No, he is from Britain, and Britain is a very diverse place. Completely burning the books as if they have any description of what Bond like, or the time in which they were written, population of England at the time, or even what English or British means. No, Wilson thinks that Bond can be anybody. Maybe we could end up with a Russian James Bond in the Cold War fighting Russia. That'd be interesting. Get out this Japanese samurai Bond. Or a cowboy Bond. I mean, there are Americans living in England. That makes them English. How about we have a Roman James Bond who goes around with a gladius defeating everybody? Italians live in Britain. That makes them British. These were the people in charge of the franchise before Amazon took over. I don't even know they have to go that far, though. If they were that desperate, they could just get Pierce Brosnan to get the boot polish out on a stealth mission. Glowing skin, definitely easier to spot at night time. So there are some advantages to be had. I do like that this article was written before the conclusion of Craig's Bond, and so when she says, "We came to an emotionally satisfying conclusion," says Broccoli, she means Daniel Craig crying as a missile hits him in the face. Which, to be fair, was my favourite part of his entire run as Bond. I laughed. Didn't buy any popcorn going into the cinema, but I'm sure bought some celebratory ones on the way out. The elder Broccoli died in 1996, but not before ceding control to Barbara, that proved a sexist super spy still had a role to play in post-Cold War cinema, as long as she removed his prized possessions. Anyway. Ana de Armas also agrees there's no need for a female Bond. What I would like is for the female roles in Bond films to be brought to life in a different way. We need to change him for me, even though I'm not the target market of Bond. No, please, change everything you have for me. I don't like it, you see. I know it's a decade-old franchise, but I don't like it. So it must change, it must. No. It is funny that apparently, as Barbara won't take no for an answer, it was the only one that should have been said in this regard, but here we are. The female roles need to be given a more substantial part and recognition. That's what I think is more interesting than flipping things. Please, sir, can we overshadow James Bond in his own movie? That'd make it good. Why are we listening to these people? Yes, but I don't like it. And what are you going to do about it? Cry. Yeah, that'll teach you. I'm modern, you see. This is why the best result for the audience was Barbara to keep fighting with Amazon. Not only was it funny, the more she insulted them, the more you find out that Amazon had to hire a Barbara whisperer just to talk to her, because Amazon being Amazon offended her by their very nature. And for the people that destroyed Wheel of Time and Lord of the Rings, that's karma.
If I make just a literal interpretation of the books where they're just saying the lines that are on the page and we deliver them to screen, it will not feel right to the audience.
Rafe Judkins, best known for his stint in Survivor.
Well, I'm a gay Mormon Ivy League grad wilderness guide.
And peeing blindfolded onto a helicopter. He absolutely annihilated Wheel of Time under the Amazon banner. Jennifer Solke, leading Amazon, is one of the worst things that can happen, and she also should have been fired.
But a movie like Late Night, for example, that I know the industry made an example of as a failure or a misstep from Amazon. And the truth is we bought that movie because I believe the movie's commercial. It went through this, contractually obligated theatrical release. And then it gets this, horrible report card. But the truth is the movie's been watched.
Like Barbara should have been, because neither of these people have the capability, the nous talent, or sheer kahunas to actually control or understand, comprehend masculine properties.
Well, first time for everything.
What makes you think this is my first time?
Oh, Mr. Bond.
And on MGM's website, which Amazon bought, you have James Bond, Rocky, Viking, Stargate, RoboCop. All of these are masculine properties. These are their featured franchises, the ones that Amazon think are the most important that they own from MGM, the majority of which are male properties. And yet Jennifer Solke rules them all. Is it any wonder that she can't make any of them a success?
Then it gets this, horrible report card, but the truth is the movie's been watched.
I'd even argue that The Handmaid's Tale is probably best run by a man, as a man controlling or oppressing the IP would likely appeal to the dominate me harder daddy viewers even more than the actual storyline.
It's about money and power.
Yeah, they might complain, but they'd enjoy it.
Could ride you to victory.
As I spoke about last time when it came out that Broccoli and Jennifer Solke were at war over the control of the franchise, you only have to look at who they were considering to be the next Bond to see that there are no brakes on this train. There was going to be no improvement no matter who was in control of the franchise. A Hollywood Reporter came out and predicted that Josh O'Connor would be the next Bond, and I'm like, I'm sorry.
Bro, can hear the colors. Bro, thinks mute is too loud. Bro.
Looks like he needs a feather to fly. There's absolutely no way I could ever see him as Bond.
Heard the joke before somebody said it, bro. Heard the news before they even spread it, bro.
How is he ever going to be a secret agent? You'd see him coming a mile off. Despite his natural ability to pick up radio waves, one clap and he's done.
It's the definition of I'm all ears. Bro, move out of the way, I can't hear, bro.
He was in this movie Challengers, where, from what I can gather, all three of them were having it off with each other. That's just not the image of Bond. This isn't the image of Bond. Any man which has held their hands in this position should be disqualified as a matter of principle.
I didn't have many friends in New York.
I was in New York with no friends.
And then my agent set me up on like a friend date.
Let alone the first 14 seconds of this interview, which it just doesn't show him in a very good light.
With Justin. What? Yeah, don't. It's weird.
Who's your agent?
You know what?
There was a gag for the cameras.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
Now.
I know, actors, not the sharpest tool in the shed. But I mean, come on. License to Kill, I think he'd apologise to his own shadow. He puts more emphasis on the Queen than the country.
No alarm clock needed. Bro can hear the sunrise. Bro can hear back in time.
This is why, although the fight was best for the viewers, now one side has collapsed, I'm also not too worried about it. The only way to preserve Bond was for literally nothing to get made. The moment one side won, it didn't really matter which side won, they're both as bad as each other. The only difference is Amazon wants spin-offs, but Jennifer Sulky and Barbara Broccoli are the same person. They agree on everything else. The only difference is Amazon winning means that more bad stuff will be made faster. But I can laugh at that. If a Miss Moneypenny series gets made, like Amazon wants, I'll piss myself laughing. I've sat and watched James Bond get effeminately dismantled, turned into an emotional, inferior version of himself, for years already. To me, Brosnan was the last Bond. So I'm not scared of James Bond being destroyed. I think he already has been. By Barbara. And so now she's left in Amazon 1, what's going to change? Apart from Amazon burning hundreds of millions of dollars trying to make properties that won't be a success because they can't comprehend masculinity. They can't comprehend James Bond. And no one has been able to understand him for years because these are ants looking at a shoe unable to comprehend the human. And so everything they make will be a poor man's imitation of what came before. They will mimic the shoe and not even know why it exists because they can't even comprehend what a man is. And at its core, that's James Bond. Because I've seen these people destroy property after property. I know exactly how they'll do it. I understand their ideology and I understand what they're lacking. It's so predictable at this point. The problems, the ways they'll create solutions, the NPCs trying to imitate humanity, that I realized that James Bond had been destroyed a long time ago. And now, I'm just gonna laugh as you burn all of your money. And sure, it's Amazon, they'll make more, but this will still be millions of dollars that you fritter away on incompetent people that you should have fired a long time ago. And quite frankly, I don't know what's worse. The fact that Amazon has all of these obviously incompetent, incapable people leading and creating all of their shows, or that the even higher-ups at Amazon are too thick, too stupid, and too unable to comprehend basic entertainment that they don't even know they need to fire these people. Who really is the worst person in that scenario? The trash that need to be fired, or the trash that don't know they need to fire them? You'll have to let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. But for now, that's it from me. If you like the video, press like, subscribe, more videos like this in the future, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.